I get to introduce our last speaker. So Alan, he's been on panels with me. I've seen him speak many times. He was the keynote at the last Built Green conference. He's a wonderful speaker. He's a friend, and he runs an amazing organization. I'm going to quickly, we share an affinity for Gary Snyder. So I'm going to read you a quote about Gary Snyder that lends right into Alan. Gary Snyder wrote an essay in 1969. Talked about 4 changes that need to come about in order to hasten the future we envision. One of them was transformation, right? This is what he says about that. Since it doesn't seem practical or even desirable to think that bloody force will achieve much, it would be best to consider this transformation a continuing revolution of consciousness, which will be won not by guns, but by seizing the key images, myths, archetypes, eschatologies, ecstasies, so that life won't seem worth living unless one's on the side of transforming energy. More concretely, we will get no transformation without our feet on the ground. Stewardship means, for most of us, find your place on the planet, dig in, and take responsibility from there. The tiresome but tangible work of school boards, county supervisors, local foresters, local politics, even while keep holding in mind the largest scale of potential change. Get a sense of workable territory, learn about it, and start acting point by point. On all levels, from national to local, the need to move toward a steady state economy, equilibrium, dynamic balance, and inner personal growth is stressed. Must be taught. And I can hardly imagine a better teacher than Alan Durning. No pressure.
That was the worst introduction I've ever had in my life, because you raised your expectations instead of lowering your expectations. Oh, Aaron. Hi, I'm Alan. I'll try to speak in complete sentences. Thank you for your attention and for the work that all of you guys are doing. Have I successfully lowered your expectations? I'm not actually going to be that engaging or interesting, and I'm certainly not up to Gary Snyder standards. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a trailer of a talk, because we've got ridiculously small amounts of time. My friend Mike Harcourt, former premier of BC, said 10 minutes is enough time to clear his throat, and that's about right for me as well. But I will say, Sightline. Oh, does this work? In fact, it'd be good if you could integrate the technology so well in this building that I could just think to advance the slide, and it would. Sightline is, as many of you know, the Northwest Sustainability Think Tank. Our work is, we've been doing it for 24 years. We're no longer a startup. Our work has helped to inspire the BC Carbon Tax, the online service that many of you probably know called Walk Score, Seattle's new democracy voucher program, we designed that, and lots of other things over the years. Right now, we're working hardest on putting a price on carbon pollution in Washington and Oregon. Now, we've already done that in California and British Columbia, blocking fossil fuel export terminals across Cascadia, strengthening democracy through public campaign financing and electoral reforms like ranked choice voting. Look it up, it's a big deal. And advancing affordable housing. But what I'm going to do is just give you a taste instead of telling you more about our work or making like a pitch. There's no pitch, there's an offer. We have, I think, 15 copies of the book, Green Collar Jobs. They're free for you to take. It would be nice if you signed up for one of our free email newsletters. Even here from our team is going to circulate sign-up sheets, and They're awesome newsletters. How many of you are already a subscriber to one or another Sightline newsletter? So give a holler to say, you should sign up, everyone else. Thank you to those of you who are reading already, and thanks to those of you who in the room are already Sightline supporters. So here we go. I'm going to talk about housing for a few minutes. The housing market is like a giant game of musical chairs spread across the entire metropolitan area. It's all just musical chairs. Now, when we were kids and you're playing musical chairs, you had to be fast, or else you end up on the ground, excluded, kicked out. Right? In the housing market, you don't so much have to be fast, you have to be rich. That's why I call it cruel musical chairs. When there aren't enough chairs, people with money always win. People without money always lose. That's the fundamental dynamic of cruel musical chairs. But it's the same basic dynamic, whether we're talking about kids, whether we're talking about 3 million adults spread across a metropolitan area like in Greater Seattle. It's the same game. You need a chair for every person or someone's going to end up excluded, sitting on the ground. You need one dwelling for every household. Without enough dwellings, people will bid up the price. Prices will soar, and who's going to end up excluded? Those at the bottom of the market, those with the least money. It's really, really that simple. So the only way to stop the rise of prices and of rents, to stop displacing those with the fewest resources, is to provide enough chairs. We need more housing, all shapes, all sizes, for everyone who wants to be our neighbors. Now, Seattle's in the middle of the fastest population growth and one of the fastest economic growth periods in its entire history. Like since the gold rush, we are growing at an absolutely phenomenal rate. And we're also building a lot of housing. We probably built more apartments last year than in any single year before. But we're still not keeping up. We're still not keeping up. And we're building extraordinarily little ownership housing. There's not much space left for single-family houses and condos. We're building, I think we did one building last year of condos in the entire city. So this game of cruel musical chairs is showing up in many ways in our own lives. Everyone has a housing story in Seattle about a friend who had to move to Lake Forest Park or Tacoma, or how much your home equity went up last year. It's all different aspects of this game of cruel musical chairs. It shows up most poignantly, perhaps, in the displacement that's happening in our historically minority communities, but it also shows up in the data. And so, since I run a think tank, I'll talk about the data rather than the feelings and the stories. No, maybe we'll tell some stories later. We'll see. So, average home prices and rents per square foot are shown on this chart. Is there a cool laser pointer? Probably there is. Beck, could you integrate the technology so well that I could? Top of the chart shows home price per square foot, so normalized for building size, in 4 major metropolitan areas. Seattle is the second from the right. And on the bottom you have rent per square foot, normalized to one-bedroom apartments. Again, so Seattle, just look at the top half of the graph. On the far right is San Francisco. Our home prices are only half as high as San Francisco. So good on us, right? But on the right is San Francisco, and we're number 2, at least on this chart, with home prices about half as high as San Francisco, and rising very quickly. To the left of Seattle is Chicago, and to the left of that is Houston. And that's the one I want to talk about. Home prices in Houston per square foot is about 1/3 as high as Seattle. Houston is not a city that we typically look to for lessons, but I'm going to look to Houston for lessons. Houston is perhaps the most pro-housing city in the United States of America. Housing costs less in Houston now, adjusted for inflation, than it did in 1980. Seattle home values have doubled and doubled and doubled again since 1980. But in Houston, they've actually gone down. So today, the median price of a single-family house in Harris County, the county that surrounds Houston, is $141,000. I don't think there's a single house in all of King County that's available for $141,000. The median value of a home in King County is $658,000. The median price, so 4.5 times as high. And Houston is not some Rust Belt city of decay and out-migration. This is not Detroit or St. Louis, where the housing stock is bigger than the population, because the population has been shrinking. Houston is not only the 4th largest city in the United States, it's also one of the fastest growing, with a vibrant and diversified economy and an extraordinarily diversified population. It is perhaps the most diverse large metropolitan area in the country, kind of a demographic forerunner of the United States overall. There is no majority population in Houston. The population of the metropolitan area is divided not quite evenly, but evenly-ish between whites, African Americans, Asian Americans, and Latinos. Right? So Houston is kind of what America looks like in the future, except with really affordable housing. How is Houston so affordable? Some of you already know the answer. Houston has enabled housing construction with little red tape, little delay. In fact, Houston in the city, not in the suburbs, but in the city itself, Houston doesn't even have zoning. There is no zoning in the city of Houston. There are other constraints built into local codes, but compared with other North American cities, Houston is the most welcoming to home building. Now, the way that, some of you are thinking this already, raise your hand if I say it and you were thinking this already, the way Houston has achieved such extraordinary affordability may not suit us. It has sprawled, right? You guys are with me already, right? Okay. Greater Houston overall covers an area the size of the state of Massachusetts. But still, Houston has a lesson for us. We should stop paying any attention to San Francisco when it comes to housing policies. Right? It's completely irrelevant. They have done it completely horribly and wrong in every way. But still, because we're Seattle on the West Coast, we look like, oh, San Francisco, they're all liberal and cool, and they have a better opera than us. But Houston is the place that has stopped the game of cruel musical chairs. Housing costs less than it did in 1980. They have put out enough chairs for everyone who's playing the game. They have built enough homes for everyone. Now, they have done it by sprawling, it is true. So the question we should ask ourselves about, after thinking about Houston, is not, can you end the cruel musical chairs of the housing market? The question is, can you do it without sprawling, right? Or is only sprawl the way we can get there? Well, it turns out you can. Consider Tokyo. Tokyo is the largest city in the world. Regional population, metropolitan population is about, more than 10 times larger than Greater Seattle. 38 million people in the metropolitan area of Tokyo. Biggest city in the world. And as population goes up, as the larger the city gets, it tends to be that land values and housing prices go up automatically. Tokyo is also one of the densest cities in the world. Though it's big, how big would Houston be if it were 38 million people, right? It is one of the most transit-oriented cities in the world. It has extraordinarily low per capita carbon emissions, much lower than Seattle or other U.S. cities. And this may come as a surprise to you because we are used to hearing stories about expensive luxury goods in Tokyo or expensive apartments or condos in the center of the city. But overall in Tokyo, housing is a bargain. You can buy a detached single-family house in a close-in neighborhood of Tokyo for $300,000. That's less than half of the price in the city of Seattle. Again, our city, 1/10 the size. And we pay more than twice as much for a house. And rent has decreased in Tokyo over the last decade. Now you may say, well, but Japan's economy is bad and its population isn't growing. Well, Tokyo's economy is actually pretty good, and Tokyo's population is growing. So Tokyo actually is a completely relevant example. What's happened is Tokyo has built more dwellings than its population has increased. Construction of new homes has outpaced population increase. And why has that happened? Well, just as in Houston, Tokyo lets you build housing. Home construction is really easy. There are very few legal barriers. There are few delays, not a lot of red tape. If you want to build housing in Tokyo, you pretty much can. So look at how much construction there's been in Tokyo proper. Here we'll narrow down from the entire metropolitan area to just the city of Tokyo itself, which is still 13 million people. Right? City of Seattle is 700,000. So Tokyo's got 13 million people. In 2014, which is the most recent year for which I could find complete data, the construction industry started 142,000 homes. Broke ground on 142,000 homes. Well, that's two big numbers. Alan, what does that mean? Okay, the entire state of California, the same year, 3 times the population, started 84,000 new homes. Just a little bit more than half as many homes as Tokyo was building. Right? Tokyo builds enormous quantities of housing, and Tokyo is not alone. If you don't like that example, there are plenty others. Consider Vienna, a city that may appeal more to your aesthetic than Tokyo does, though I think Tokyo's pretty awesome. In the 1920s, a far-left government began erecting vast new blocks of apartments. They had leading architects design these apartment units. Many of these are admired to this day by urbanists. Architecture students go off to Vienna and praise it. And the additional generations of additions of this publicly provided housing and of housing that's built by low-profit associations or nonprofit associations now accommodate about 62% of the city's population. Housing prices are dramatically lower in Vienna than in Seattle or in other U.S. cities. But it's not because it's publicly built housing that it's inexpensive. It's because they have ended the game of cruel musical chairs. They just built a lot of housing, a lot of it. They still build much more than we do, though the metropolitan area is not terribly dissimilar from Seattle. But there are other things about it that are interesting to notice. Vienna is much denser in its construction of housing than Seattle. The city is mostly apartments. There's not a single acre of single-family zoning in the entire city of Vienna. And consequently, because they're building mostly housing in mid-rise, beautiful mid-rise apartment complexes with courtyards and green all around them, they have a lot of land that they can put into parks and open space. About half of the land area of the city of Vienna is parks and open space. It's that's 3.5 times the share of the city of Seattle. But mostly they have built a lot of housing. So housing prices are low and stable. Homeownership is, in Austria in general, homeownership is not the path to accumulating assets. One economist studying Austria and Germany and their homeownership patterns is that housing is a boring commodity that does not appreciate much over time. It's just like having a very, very durable washing machine or something. It provides you with housing, and that's about it. So I'm probably past out of time, huh? There are a lot of other cities with lessons to teach us if we just go looking for them. This is Montreal, a fascinating example. Housing prices are about a third as high in Montreal as they are here, though it's a much bigger city. It's the third largest city in Canada. And I don't have time to talk about it because we're just doing the trailer, not the whole talk. The article titled at the top, if you want to get more of this theme that I'm riffing on, Yes, You Can Build Your Way to Affordable Housing, is where all this is taken from. You can find much more information there and sources for all the things that I've just been saying. I guess I would conclude with this. There are some cities with affordable housing that build it through the private sector. Talked about Tokyo, talked about Houston. Some build it through the public sector. Singapore is an example. Some mostly through the nonprofit sector, and some blend the sectors. Vienna has done a lot of blending of different sectors building. But in every city where housing is affordable, the lesson is exactly the same for us in Seattle. You have to build enough housing for everyone who wants to be your neighbor. Enough housing, all shapes, all sizes, to end this game of cruel musical chairs. I'll leave it there. Thank you.